He was just driving to a meeting, a respected architect volunteering his time to help LGBTQ plus youth. Then a routine traffic stop turned into something much darker. Pulled over, handcuffed, threatened, not once but again and again. The officer had a badge, a grudge, and years of complaints swept under the rug. The system ignored it, the city denied it, but he didn't back down. He gathered evidence, found allies, and uncovered a trail of fear and silence stretching back years. When the courtroom doors opened, it wasn't just his truth on trial, it was the system itself. Because justice isn't just about one man, it's about what happens when no one is watching. But this time everyone was. Would you have stood your ground? Let us know in the comments, and if Elijah's fight moved you, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes in change. I always liked mornings. There was something sacred about them before the city's noise caught up with the sun. That morning I was headed to the Montrose Community Center, a quiet drive with a coffee in my left hand and a poster board tucked against the passenger seat. I was set to present some pro bono architecture sketches for the LGBTQ plus youth shelter expansion. Simple lines, affordable materials, clean light. The kind of design that said, "You belong here." I had double-checked my registration and insurance the night before. My seatbelt was on, music was low. I was driving 5 miles under the limit because my back tire felt a little low and I'd planned to get it filled after the meeting. I was doing everything right. When the flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror, I felt more confused than alarmed. There was no one else on that street, just me and whoever was in that cruiser. I pulled over near the edge of Westthamer, right outside a closed coffee shop. The engine of the patrol car didn't cut off. I waited, hands on the wheel, windows rolled down halfway. The officer approached slow, like he had all the time in the world. His posture was casual, but the look in his eye wasn't. He was white, mid-40s, maybe older, with short buzzed hair and a hard mouth. He didn't introduce himself. "You in a hurry or something?" he asked. I blinked. "No, sir. I'm just heading to a community center." "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer that, just circled my car slowly like I was a threat. I watched him in the side mirror. He leaned in and squinted at my dashboard, then jerked his chin toward my registration sticker. "That looks expired." "It was renewed last month. The sticker hasn't come in yet, but I have the confirmation email." He stared at me for a second like he was trying to find something in my face. Then he asked where I was coming from, where I was going, what was in my bag. I answered calmly. I told him I was an architect doing volunteer work for a youth shelter. I offered to show him the blueprints and the donation letter from the nonprofit. That only seemed to make him colder. "Those places, huh?" he said. "You part of that crowd?" I felt it then, not fear, something heavier, the way he said that crowd, like he was pointing at a pile of trash. "I'm gay if that's what you mean," I said plainly. "Is there a reason for the stop?" He grunted and went back to his car with my license. I watched him in the rearview. No radio calls, no computer typing, just sitting there like he was deciding something. 7 minutes passed, then 8. I was late now. He finally returned and handed me a ticket. "Unsafe vehicle, back tires low." I opened my mouth, then closed it. The tire wasn't unsafe. I was getting it looked at, but I didn't argue. I signed the paper, took the ticket, and drove off slowly. The meeting went fine. I didn't mention the stop, didn't bring it up over lunch with my coworker, didn't tell my sister when she called that evening. It didn't feel big enough, not yet, just a flicker, but it didn't leave me either. The second time, it was less subtle. I had just parked in the garage under my firm's office building the following week when he appeared again. Same cruiser, same face, same casual coldness. He claimed I rolled through a stop sign outside the structure, though I hadn't seen him anywhere nearby. "Funny seeing you again," he said as he walked up. "Didn't take my warning, huh?" He wasn't smiling. His eyes darted to the backseat, then to my face, then to the tiny rainbow keychain that dangled off my gym bag. "You just keep making yourself visible," he muttered. I didn't speak. This time I turned on my phone camera quietly and tucked it into the cup holder, lens up. It caught audio at least. He asked me to step out of the car. Claimed my insurance didn't match my plate, which it did. He called it suspicious. When I refused to step out without a clear reason, he leaned in closer than necessary. I could smell his cologne, thick and sharp. He told me to keep my hands where he could see them, then pulled open my door and gestured for me to step out anyway. I complied. By the time he had me against the car, handcuffed for officer safety, a woman across the street had started filming. I heard her voice faintly. "Hey, that's not okay, I know him." Branning didn't react. I was in cuffs for exactly 3 minutes before he let me go. No arrest, no citation, no explanation. He walked back to his cruiser like nothing had happened. That evening I went home and cried in the shower for the first time in years, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what this was and how hard it would be to prove. Still, I filed the complaint. I walked into the precinct with the footage, the timestamp, the witness's name, and a printout of my insurance and registration. The desk sergeant barely looked up. Internal Affairs handles that, he said. I filled out a form, left the video link. Never heard back. Weeks passed. Work continued. I kept driving with a cautious heart and both hands on the wheel, but something had shifted, not just in me but in the air, like I was waiting for something worse to happen, or maybe already knowing it would. And I wasn't wrong. The city didn't change. The same streets wound their way through Montrose and Midtown, the same light rails screeched by the same corners, and the same morning joggers passed by my window every day. But something inside me shifted. I couldn't unsee that man's face in the mirror, Officer Branning. I learned his name only after filing the complaint. It had a sharpness to it, like it should come with a warning label. The footage the woman filmed outside my office got posted online the next day. It was only a few seconds, grainy and shaky, but enough to capture the end of it, me in cuffs, saying something calm and him turning without explanation. No badge number, no citation, no protocol, just force. It didn't go viral, not exactly, but it spread. People in the comments argued about what happened, most of them not knowing me at all. A few gay friends texted saying they'd seen it. I didn't know that was you. You okay? That cop looked familiar. That last one stayed with me. I didn't expect Internal Affairs to move fast, but after a week passed with no contact, I called to follow up. The receptionist said my complaint was still under review. She didn't ask my name, just repeated the phrase like she'd been trained to say it 100 times. I asked when I could expect an update. She didn't know or pretended not to. I called again the next week, still under review. That phrase became a wall. I didn't stop living. I had meetings to attend, designs to finish, projects that depended on me. But I felt the edge of something sharp waiting, like glass under a rug. I checked behind me in traffic now. I parked in lots with cameras. I moved through the world like it was suddenly smaller and full of eyes. Then one Friday evening, I stepped outside my firm just after 7. Most of the team had left already. I liked working late when the office quieted and the phone stopped buzzing. It gave me space to think. Design requires silence sometimes. As I unlocked my car, a voice behind me made my chest seize. Well, well. I turned slowly. Officer Branning leaned against his cruiser across the street, arms folded, sunglasses on despite the setting sun. He didn't approach, just watched. You always work this late, he called. I didn't respond. He stepped off the curb, walking slowly now, casual like before. You know, he said, voice low as he reached me, I don't take kindly to being filmed without consent. I didn't film you, I said. He smiled, tight-lipped. Don't play smart. You and your little friend with the phone. She was a witness. You call it that, I call it troublemaking. He paused, then said, you think people care what happens to you. That part stung not because I believed it, but because it was said like a fact. Not a threat, just a reality he'd gotten used to. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an answer. He leaned in a little too close again. Keep pushing and you'll find out how far that gets you. I started recording again, this time openly. I pulled out my phone and held it between us. I'm recording for my safety, I said. My voice shook just a little. He laughed, not loudly but real. You think a little phone's gonna save you. He stepped back, walked to his cruiser, and drove off without another word. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed it over and over, wondered if I should have said more or less. I watched the recording again, nothing extreme, nothing that would make anyone gasp, but it wasn't nothing, it was pressure, it was pattern. I pulled out my laptop and opened the city complaint portal again, added a new entry with the video and a timeline. I kept it professional. I detailed the dates, times, language. I attached the footage, noted the location, logged everything. This time I CC'd a local advocacy group, one I'd volunteered with in the past, Houston Equality Defense. I didn't ask for help, I just wanted the record to be undeniable. 3 days later, I got an email from a woman named Maya Dorsey. She wasn't with the advocacy group, she was on city council. Her message was short. I saw what happened, call me. I wasn't sure if I should. The idea of someone from inside the system reaching out felt risky, but I did. Maya's voice was firm and measured, the way you talk when you've had to hold power at a distance your whole life. You're not the first, she said. I sat in silence for a second. He's been a problem, she continued. Not officially, of course. No one ever gets traction. What does that mean? It means they close files, they drag their feet. They bury stories, but people remember, and they talk. Maya explained that Officer Branning had been the subject of multiple complaints over the years. Use of force, discriminatory stops, even one report from a trans woman who said he laughed while she cried after being handcuffed for a supposed warrant that didn't exist. Every case was closed. No wrongdoing found. How do you know all this? I asked. I've been tracking patterns. I'm not supposed to say more unless you're serious about going forward. I'm serious, I said without hesitation. Maya told me to keep documenting. She said she had access to a few things that weren't public yet, personnel files, internal logs. She warned me it might get worse before it got better. I'll stand with you, she said, but only if you stand your ground. The next morning, I received an anonymous text. "You're gonna regret this." I didn't recognize the number. It wasn't a direct threat, not in the legal sense. But it felt like a brick tossed through the window of my calm. I forwarded it to Maya. She told me to save it, log it, move on. I started backing up everything. I kept my phone on me at all times. I updated my will. That felt ridiculous even as I typed it, but it helped. It gave me a sense of structure. I told my sister, finally. She cried when I explained it all, and then she did what big sisters do. She made lists. Lawyers, advocacy contacts, local media. She said she'd help however she could. People think it's easy to go public. They think justice is this clean, proud process. They don't see the fear that lives in your gut. They don't see the nights you pace your hallway and wonder if your car will still be outside in the morning. They don't hear the silence from officials who said they'd call you back but never do. I started carrying 2 phones, one personal, one for everything else. I installed dash cams front and rear. I walked through the world differently, not smaller but sharper, like I couldn't afford to miss a single detail anymore. And still I waited. Waited for the moment this would break wide open or break me first. I started waking up earlier. Not because I wanted to, but because sleep stopped offering anything useful. I'd lie in bed and listen to the sounds outside, trash trucks, birds, early buses. Then I'd think about him, not his face exactly, but the way it felt when he was near. Like the rules didn't apply anymore, like the space I was standing in wasn't mine. The second complaint sat in my inbox, status unchanged, under review. 2 weeks had passed, then 3. When I called the precinct again, the officer on the phone gave me a familiar script. Internal Affairs was handling it. They'd reach out if they had questions. I asked to speak with someone directly. The line disconnected before I could press again. Maya said not to be surprised. "This is how they kill a complaint," she told me. "Not with a ruling, with silence." She and I met one evening at a quiet Vietnamese cafe off Richmond. She wore a loose gray sweater and no makeup, her hair in a low bun like she'd rushed from another meeting. She ordered tea and slid a manila folder across the table without ceremony. "I'm not supposed to have this," she said. Inside were photocopied complaints against Officer Branning. Names redacted, but the descriptions were clear enough. One said he pulled a gay man out of his car and accused him of solicitation. Another described a woman being searched in front of her young daughter without cause. The pattern was unmistakable: same officer, same tone, same sudden aggression, same vanishing trail once paperwork hit a desk. Most had a box checked next to closed, no further action required. I asked how many total complaints had been filed. 32 that we can confirm, she said. That's just the ones that left a footprint. And no disciplinary action. Maya shook her head. He's clean on paper, that's what they'll say. I didn't speak for a while. I just kept flipping through the papers, looking at the way official indifference was organized. Each report had a date, a badge number, a vague summary, and then the silence. That was the part that hit me. The silence wasn't passive, it was enforced. "I want to sue," I said quietly. Maya met my eyes. "Then we build the case." We started small. She connected me with a legal nonprofit that handled civil rights cases, specifically those involving police misconduct. A woman named Nadine took the lead. She was sharp-eyed and soft-voiced, the kind of person who asked you to repeat things not because she wasn't listening, but because she wanted the words just right. She helped me draft a formal civil rights complaint and attach both videos, mine and the bystander. She filed a Freedom of Information request for Officer Branning's full personnel record, disciplinary actions, and body cam logs. "Don't expect them to cooperate," she said. "But the request forces them to acknowledge this isn't going away." The city had 10 business days to respond. On day 11, we got a single-line email from the department. "Your request has been received and is being processed in accordance with applicable statutes." No attachments, no records, no clarity. At work, I kept things moving. I stayed late to make up for the hours I was spending on calls and paperwork, but it was getting harder to keep the lines between things. The fear followed me everywhere now. I checked my rearview mirror too often. I skipped my usual runs through the park. I kept my apartment door double locked, then checked it again before bed. My sister Olivia offered to stay with me for a while. She said she could work remotely. I told her I was fine, but she came anyway. When I opened the door and saw her with a duffel bag and her laptop slung over one shoulder, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. We didn't talk much about what was happening, not at first. She cooked. I made playlists for the drive to the office. We moved like people pretending things were normal until the day one of my clients canceled a contract without explanation. No warning, just a vague email about budget reconsiderations. It wasn't the first sign something was shifting. Over the next few days, 2 other small design consultations evaporated the same way. People stopped responding. I started to wonder if my name was showing up somewhere, on a list, in a thread, in someone's inbox with a note to steer clear. One night, I opened my email and saw a message from an anonymous address. Nobody's gonna believe a F asterisk 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 T with a grudge. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I sent the message to Nadine and Maya. No response would have been worse than silence, but they both got back to me quickly. Save everything, Nadine wrote. This is exactly the kind of intimidation they hope scares you off. That same day, Maya called and said she wanted to meet again, this time with someone else present. I met them both at a public library downtown. The third person was a young man named Adrian. He was small, with neat hair and tired eyes. He looked like someone who had learned how to take up less space than he deserved. I used to work at the shelter you're helping, he said. Branning came around a few times, said he was checking for loiterers. But he always had something to say when it was just me locking up. Adrian described how the officer once followed him to his car after a late shift, accused him of trespassing on property he worked at, and threatened to check his status if he didn't leave the neighborhood. Adrian said he'd filed a report. It was closed within the week. I didn't think it was worth fighting, he said. Nobody even called me back. That night I made a list of every place Officer Branning had ever stopped me. I pulled my GPS logs, calendar invites, call histories. I added every email, every interaction. It felt obsessive, but it also gave me something to do, something to control. The next week, the nonprofit's legal team formally notified the city of our intent to sue. The police department didn't respond to the press release. But I got 2 calls that afternoon from blocked numbers. One left a message, a single word, careful. I forwarded it, saved it, wrote it down. Later that week, I was heading to my car after a site visit when I noticed a small tear in one of my tires. Not big, but intentional, like someone wanted me to see it to know it wasn't random. I didn't flinch, I called a tow. I waited calmly, because if they were watching, I wanted them to know something too. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't expect a pattern to emerge so fast. I thought it would be scattered pieces, quiet rumors, things whispered in back rooms or forgotten in dusty filing cabinets. But once Adrian came forward, others followed, slowly at first, then steadily, like they'd been waiting for someone to go first. Maya kept a burner phone just for this. People called late at night. Left voicemails with trembling voices. Described traffic stops that escalated for no reason. Most of them were LGBTQ+, some were people of color. All of them remembered one thing clearly, the name on the badge, Branning. One man described being pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. The officer had searched his trunk, then asked why he smelled like that, like queerness had a scent. Another said he was walking home from a club when Branning demanded ID and accused him of loitering in his own neighborhood. A trans woman recalled being followed for 6 blocks, then forced to sit on a curb while the officer ran her information, a process that took nearly half an hour and resulted in no citation. They all had similar endings, no formal complaint filed, or if one was, no follow-up. Some didn't even remember how to begin the process. Some were too scared. And all of them, without exception, believed they wouldn't be taken seriously. I understood now why silence had become its own kind of protection. You stayed quiet so you didn't make things worse, so you didn't get followed again, so you didn't become someone's target more than you already were. But once people saw there was movement, once they realized someone was naming it out loud and backing it up with paper and process and presence, the silence started to crack. Nadine helped organize the stories. She categorized them by date, location, type of interaction, and whether any body camera footage should exist. Some of the complainants agreed to go on the record. Others preferred to remain anonymous for now but gave permission for their stories to be included in the evidence files. We created a shared drive with folders of audio, video, and written testimony. It was professional, clean, and getting bigger every day. Meanwhile, the city dragged its feet. They responded to our legal notices with boilerplate language and delays. They sent partial documents when ordered to release full files. A few body cam clips came in, but half of them were corrupted. One had no audio. Another was inexplicably missing the 10-minute segment that corresponded with the time of the traffic stop we'd asked about. It's not incompetence, Maya said. It's control. She didn't look tired, she looked resolved, like someone who'd waited years for the right fight. One afternoon, Nadine received a call from a former officer who refused to give his name but said he had information. He wouldn't meet in person, but he described how Branning had a reputation internally, someone who kept order in neighborhoods the brass didn't want to deal with. He said Branning was known to be aggressive with queer folks, especially after his brother had been outed years earlier and cut ties with the family. We couldn't verify it, not entirely. But the language matched what we were seeing, violence disguised as order. Bias passed off as instinct. The deeper we dug, the clearer the system became. There were notes missing from files, logs scrubbed clean, repeated timestamps showing Branning turning off his body cam minutes into a stop, then turning it back on right before walking away. When we requested internal review records, the city claimed those were protected under personnel privacy laws. Nadine argued the pattern of abuse made it a matter of public interest. Another delay, another letter from the department's legal counsel politely telling us to wait, but we weren't waiting anymore. Maya pushed for a closed-door hearing with other members of city council. She brought a curated file, just 5 cases, the most clearly documented. She told me not to expect miracles, just pressure, sometimes that's enough. After the meeting, a junior staffer slipped her a note, "Keep going." You're not wrong. One morning, I opened my inbox to find 3 new emails. One was from a community organizer who worked with LGBTQ plus youth and recognized Branning's name from complaints made by teens over the past 5 years. Another was from a mother whose son had been pulled over and humiliated, asked invasive questions about his sexuality in front of a friend. The third was a man I didn't know who simply wrote, "He stopped me too. I still dream about it." I didn't reply to that last one. I just sat there letting the words settle over me. I kept my head down at work. My projects were starting to back up. I stayed late, ignored the calls I didn't recognize, and tried to balance normalcy with the mounting weight of what we were uncovering. My name was now connected to something larger than me, and with that came risk. 2 more contracts disappeared. No explanation. One client mentioned seeing me in the news. There hadn't been much press coverage, but I'd given one brief interview for a local podcast about systemic accountability. My name was mentioned in passing. That was enough, apparently. I started taking rideshares to certain places instead of driving, just in case. I made sure someone knew where I was at all times. I felt like I was living in 2 versions of the city, one where I walked freely and another where I had to map every move against a threat I couldn't always see. But the case kept growing. The file thickened. We had patterns. We had timestamps. We had evidence of interference. Maya found a data analyst who volunteered to run heat maps based on the traffic stops we documented. Branning's patrol history lit up neighborhoods with large LGBTQ+ populations, especially during late-night hours. The overlap was undeniable. "It's not random," the analyst said. "It's targeted." That word echoed in my mind, targeted. I had felt it from the beginning, but seeing it mapped out made it harder to dismiss. This wasn't just about me, it never had been. We took the maps, the testimonies, the redacted files, the missing footage, the threats, and we began building our civil suit in earnest. Nadine filed a motion requesting emergency injunctive relief, essentially asking the city to suspend Branning from active duty pending full review. They refused. Claimed there wasn't enough evidence of immediate harm. Nadine expected that. It wasn't about winning the motion. It was about forcing them to respond. Everything was shifting now. We were no longer asking for attention, we were demanding it, and still he was out there, patrolling, stopping people, smiling that smile that said, "I'm protected." I kept a bag packed near the door, just in case. Not because I planned to run, but because I needed to feel like I had an option, however imaginary. I knew what he was capable of. I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. What began as a traffic stop had become something bigger than I'd ever imagined. I didn't want to be the face of it, not really, but I understood now why I had to be. Because this time the story wouldn't be buried. Not this time. The first time I saw the flyer, I thought it was a joke. A badly made, low-resolution printout taped to the window of a bus shelter a block from my building. My face was in the middle of it, cut from a staff photo at work, pasted under bold red letters that read, "Liar, opportunist, fraud." I stood there staring at it long enough for 2 people to walk by and glance at me, then at the flyer, then away again. I didn't take it down, I just left it there, turned around and went home. By that point, I had already lost 3 clients. They all used the same language in their emails, reevaluating direction, internal reshuffling, or pausing external projects. It was never about me, not on the record, but the timing made it obvious. Something was moving behind the curtain. Whispers, warnings, a slow erosion of my name in spaces I used to move through without friction. The next attack was more direct. Someone hacked into my firm's public site and edited my bio. Replaced the paragraph about my design philosophy with a crude string of slurs and accusations, said I fabricated the traffic stop, that I had a history of drug use, that I was known to seduce officers for attention. It stayed up for 17 minutes, long enough to be screenshotted, long enough to reach Twitter. I took it down, reported the breach, reset every password I could think of, and still I felt like I was too late. Nadine warned me this would happen. "They'll try to change the story," she said. "Make you the threat, make you unstable. It's not about truth, it's about noise." She was right. The city issued a quiet statement that said the investigation into Officer Branning was ongoing, but that no evidence of misconduct had been found at this time. No mention of the lawsuit. No mention of the missing footage or the 32 complaints or the mapped pattern of stops. Just one sentence designed to sound neutral but whisper doubt. A local opinion columnist picked it up the next day and ran a piece titled, "Are We Rushing to Judge Cops in a Woke Era?" It didn't mention my name, but it quoted parts of my podcast interview out of context. called the movement around me emotional and reactionary, called the broader trend dangerous for morale. Maya was furious. They're testing the water, she said, trying to see how much pushback they'll get before they dig in. They got plenty, not just from us, but from people who remembered. Former clients of mine posted support. A few local leaders gave short statements condemning targeted harassment. Even the woman who filmed the second stop, her name was Layla, came forward and offered to testify if needed. But it still felt like we were being buried under the weight of a machine that didn't want to lose. And the machine had tools we didn't: connections, money, power wrapped in silence. One afternoon, I received a thick envelope by courier. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Branning's lawyer. It accused me of defamation, said I was damaging his reputation, demanded I retract all public statements, delete all posts, and issue a formal apology or face further legal action. I read it twice, then handed it to Nadine. She laughed, but not because it was funny. "It's noise," she said, "empty posturing, but it means they're scared." Few days later, the shelter I'd been designing for reached out, said the city had paused funding pending investigation outcomes. I asked if that meant they no longer wanted my help. The woman on the call hesitated, then said she was under pressure she couldn't name. I told her I understood, and I did. No one wants to be in the crossfire, but I still felt it like a cut. Even my office started to shift. Not directly, no one said anything, but the distance grew. Fewer lunch invitations. More closed doors. My supervisor stopped copying me on long-term planning emails. At one point, I asked him if something had changed. "We're just trying to stay neutral," he said. "You understand." I nodded. I didn't understand, but I nodded. And then, as if to punctuate it all, Branning himself broke his silence. He gave an interview on a local radio show. The host was known for his tough-on-crime stance and his dislike of identity politics. Branning framed himself as a misunderstood officer, a good man under attack by a political agenda. He said he couldn't comment on the specifics of the case, but that certain individuals were trying to ruin the lives of hardworking police officers. The host called me a professional victim. I listened to the interview twice. Not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to make sure I heard what wasn't being said. Branning never denied what happened. He just shifted the conversation until it wasn't about facts anymore. It was about feelings, about perception, about fear. That's when Nadine said it was time. "We go public, properly, no more whispers, full press conference." I didn't want to stand behind a podium. I didn't want to become a symbol, but it wasn't about what I wanted anymore. It was about the dozens of people who had trusted me with their stories. It was about the teenagers who would someday face what I had unless someone stopped it. We held it outside City Hall, not flashy, just a simple setup, mics, a banner that read "Justice is not optional," and a table with printouts of the evidence. I spoke plainly, no dramatics. I explained what happened to me and what had happened to others. I explained the documents, the missing footage, the pattern. I held up the cease and desist letter and said, "This is how they tried to silence people, but I'm still here." Layla spoke too, so did Maya. And then Adrian, his voice shaking but steady enough. The story made the evening news, not front page, but there, enough to shift the conversation again, enough to pull attention away from the noise and back toward the truth. The next morning, someone spray-painted my apartment door with the words, "You'll pay." I filed a report, took pictures, saved the footage from the security camera. The officer who came to take my statement was Branning, but he knew who I was. He didn't hide it. He didn't say much either. Before he left, he said, "Be careful out there." It didn't feel like advice, but I was beyond fear now. I was angry, not loud, shaking anger, but the kind that hardens you, the kind that sharpens your focus. I wasn't going to be chased off. They could smear me, threaten me, strip me of clients, contracts, comfort, but they couldn't take my voice, and they couldn't erase the truth. They tried to turn the story around, but I wasn't the story anymore. The system was, and the cracks were getting wider. The courtroom wasn't what I imagined. No high drama, no grand echoes. It smelled faintly of coffee and dust, and the walls were the same off-white you'd find in a DMV. The judge sat behind a broad wooden bench, unreadable, half-hidden by a stack of case files. There were no cameras, no shouting crowds, just rows of seats, a few reporters, and the hollow quiet of tension. The trial had taken months to reach this point. Motions filed, arguments about jurisdiction, endless delays from the city's legal department. But eventually, they ran out of excuses. Too many documents, too many witnesses, too much heat to keep it buried. We weren't suing Branning directly, not yet. It was the city on the line. A civil suit alleging systemic discrimination, failure to discipline, and targeted harassment of LGBTQ+ individuals. Branning would be called to testify as a central figure, but the structure above him was what we wanted to crack. Nadine looked calm, but I knew she hadn't slept much in the weeks leading up to it. She went over everything twice. Every timeline, every statement, every video clip. I'd sat through hours of prep, mock questions, voice coaching to make sure I stayed even. I didn't want to lose it on the stand. I didn't want to give them anything they could twist. The courtroom filled slowly that morning. Maya sat beside me, notebook in her lap, pen already moving. Adrian arrived, slipping into the back row quietly. Layla waved from across the aisle. The shelter director came too. Despite the city's funding freeze, she said she couldn't stay silent anymore. And then he walked in. Branning looked exactly the same, no expression, hair buzzed to the same length, same square jaw, same eyes that never settled on anyone too long. He wore a gray suit, not a uniform, but it didn't change anything. He sat down across the room and didn't look in my direction once. The judge called things to order and opening statements began. The city's lawyer kept things vague. He acknowledged regrettable encounters, but framed them as isolated, misunderstood. He insisted Officer Branning had served the community honorably and that the plaintiff, me, was misinterpreting isolated incidents in service of a broader narrative. Nadine rose next. Her voice didn't tremble. She laid out the case methodically. The stops, the missing footage, the number of complaints, the people who'd been too scared to come forward until someone else did. She never once raised her voice, but the weight of her words settled over the room like fog. The first witness was a data analyst. He walked the jury through stop patterns, showing a map with red dots that bloomed around LGBTQ+ centers, clubs, community housing, each dot a person, a moment. Together, they told a story even silence couldn't cover. Then came Layla. She spoke clearly about the day she filmed Branning handcuffing me for no reason outside my office. She described what she saw, how long he held me, the tone of his voice. She played her video again. Everyone had seen it by now, but it still landed like a punch. They tried to rattle her on cross-examination, asked why she'd been filming in the first place, if she had a grudge, if she was exaggerating. She didn't flinch. "I filmed because it didn't feel right," she said, "and now you're trying to make that a problem." The courtroom murmured and the judge had to bang his gavel. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't look at Branning. I kept my eyes on the jury. I told them what happened that morning, the first stop, the way he looked at me, the comments. Then the second time outside my office, the handcuffs, the woman filming, the silence afterward. I told them about the threats, the flyer, the spray paint. The way people had started to pull back from me quietly without explanation. They asked if I hated him. I said no. Hate's not the point. Accountability is. Branning testified on the third day. He didn't sound angry. That would have been too easy to spot. Instead, he played it calm, professional. Said he didn't remember the specific stops, but that all his actions were in line with department policy. He said my tire had looked low enough to warrant concern. That my insurance information had raised questions. He never admitted wrongdoing, never raised his voice. But he slipped. When asked about his body camera, he said it had malfunctioned a few times, but then said it had never been turned off manually. Nadine played a clip that showed a manual shutoff just seconds after he approached Adrian during a previous stop. The jury noticed. You could see it in their eyes, the small shift, the doubt blooming. Then Maya testified. She didn't come as a councilwoman. She came as a witness. She described the conversations she'd had with people too afraid to go public. She described the FOIA requests, the documents we'd found, the patterns of closed cases. She brought up the city's refusal to suspend Branning despite the mounting reports. And then she passed out copies of internal memos, one of which showed that higher-ups had been made aware of multiple complaints but chose not to escalate. The city's attorney objected, said the memos were taken out of context. The judge overruled. Adrian was the last to testify. He stood there, hands clasped, voice soft but clear. He described the night Branning followed him, the way it felt, the fear that had stayed long after the cruiser drove off. He said he didn't file a complaint because he thought it wouldn't matter, that it would just disappear like the others. But when I saw him handcuff Eli, Adrian said, I knew I should have spoken sooner. The room was quiet for a long time after he stepped down. By the end of the week, the facts were no longer in dispute. The jury had seen the footage, heard the stories, read the patterns. The city tried to close with a statement about respect for law enforcement and not allowing emotion to cloud judgment. But their voice was thin by then. Everyone could feel it, the wall was cracking. Before the judge adjourned for the day, he addressed both sides. He said this case wasn't just about one officer or one plaintiff. It was about a question that every city has to face eventually. What do you do when the system works exactly as it was designed to, but only for some people? I didn't know how it would end yet, not really, but I knew something had shifted. They couldn't pretend anymore. The mask had slipped, and the truth was standing in its place. The verdict didn't come quickly. The jury deliberated for 2 full days. Each hour dragged like it was being pulled underwater, slow and heavy. I barely slept. I didn't go to the office. I walked laps around my apartment, made tea and forgot to drink it, checked my phone every 15 minutes for news that didn't come. Maya told me to rest, but I couldn't. Rest didn't feel possible until I knew how this would end. I wasn't afraid of losing, not in the way I'd once been. I had already lost things, contracts, clients, quiet routines that used to feel invisible, but I'd gained more than I expected. A voice I didn't know I had. A A community I didn't know was listening. Late on the second day, Nadine called, just one word, verdict. I got to the courthouse before the press could swarm the steps. The courtroom felt smaller than I remembered. Same walls, same silence, but now filled with something different expectation. Branning wasn't there, he didn't have to be, this wasn't a criminal case. But the city's attorneys sat in their usual corner, looking stiff like they already knew. The judge walked in and the jury filed back into their seats. No one looked at me, they looked forward, calm, ready. The foreperson stood, cleared her throat, and read the decision. They found in my favor, unanimously. The city was held liable for failing to address a repeated pattern of discriminatory policing. The court ordered financial compensation, not just for me, but to create a fund to support legal services for others who had experienced the same treatment. A monitor would be appointed to oversee reforms in the police department. All officers, starting with those in Branning's division, would undergo mandatory LGBTQ+ training with outside facilitators, and a review board would be created to re-examine closed complaints over the last 10 years. It didn't feel real, not at first. I heard Maya's sharp breath beside me, saw Nadine close her eyes for half a second like she was letting the moment settle somewhere deep inside her. I sat very still because if I moved, I was afraid I might shake. Afterward, reporters gathered outside, cameras already rolling. I didn't want to speak. I was ready to disappear, to go home and just breathe. But I saw Adrian standing to the side, eyes shining, and I realized silence wasn't an option anymore. I stepped up to the podium. I told them it was never about revenge, that I hadn't come here looking to destroy anyone. I came to tell the truth. And that truth mattered, not just because it happened to me, but because it had been happening to people for years. Quietly, privately, painfully. I said I hoped this was the beginning of something better, and that if even one person felt safer walking down the street because of what we did, it would be worth every sleepless night. The microphones cut off eventually, the cameras pulled away. But the ripples kept moving. The city held a press conference of its own later that week. The mayor read a statement acknowledging failures in oversight and promising to cooperate with the mandated reforms. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something, a shift, a recognition. Branning was suspended without pay pending internal review. A month later, he resigned. The department didn't defend him. There was no ceremony. No praise, just a brief statement saying he was no longer with the force. He disappeared after that. I never saw him again, never heard from him, and I didn't need to. What mattered was what stayed. The oversight board launched 3 weeks later. Maya sat on it, so did Adrian, so did 2 others who had testified but never wanted their names in the news. They started by reopening 10 of the most troubling closed cases. Already 2 of those had resulted in formal discipline against other officers. Small steps, but real ones. The shelter project was revived, funding reinstated. I returned to my designs, not the same as before, but better somehow. I drew new windows that let in more light, redesigned the common area to feel more open, easier to breathe in. The blueprints were approved within a month. They broke ground that summer. One afternoon, I walked the site with Olivia. The frame was up, wood skeleton reaching toward the sky. She looked at it, then looked at me and said, "You know, I think you built more than a building." I smiled. It took me long enough. We stood there for a while in the noise of construction in the wind. She took a picture of me next to the main beam. I didn't smile in it, not fully, I just looked steady. Present, the emails never stopped. People kept reaching out, strangers, friends of friends, people from other cities. Some wanted advice, some just wanted to say thank you. One message stayed with me. I didn't think anyone would believe me, but I believe you, and that helps. I read that one 3 times. I wrote back. Months passed, the media faded. Another scandal, another election, but the changes stayed, the trainings happened, the oversight board kept meeting, complaints didn't disappear into drawers anymore, and I returned to something like a life, not the same life. A better one maybe, heavier but stronger. One evening I sat on my balcony with a stack of letters. I'd started writing again, not emails or statements, but by hand, letters I never planned to send. One was to my younger self. I told him I was sorry it took so long for the world to see him, that he wasn't wrong to speak gently or love softly or walk through the world without armor. I told him that one day someone would try to break him down and that when it happened he'd be ready, not with fists but with facts, not with rage but with resolve, and I told him he'd win, not in the way movies show it, not with applause or perfect closure, but in the real way, the way that leaves a mark, the way that makes room for someone else to stand up next. When I folded the letter and set it aside, I looked out over the city. It was still loud, still flawed. But it felt different now because I had faced it, and I was still here, still standing, still building.